Mr. Mayor, you're now live.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging we're gathered here today on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. And with the quorum being present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to start this meeting with a reminder for everyone today that North Cowichan has a respectful spaces bylaw. For some of you, the space is simply a public space, but this is also a workspace for the staff that work here, that help run the meeting, present reports, and are here to answer questions. And it's also a space for council who have been elected to our roles. Everyone here must ensure that the behavior, actions, and words, whether they're in front of a microphone or not, are respectful. We all have a right to be free of harassment, bullying, intimidation, violence, and discrimination, and must be treated with mutual respect and dignity. This means no interrupting the meeting, no disruptive behavior, no clapping, booing, or jeering. This is an opportunity for public input at the beginning of the meeting. This is an opportunity to speak to items that are on today's agenda. If you're here in person, you should have already signed up on the sheet. And if you're here virtually, you have to raise your virtual hand and staff will unmute you and it is your turn to speak. You have 3 minutes to speak, and we limit input to 5 speakers, 5 in person and 5 virtually. Details of our Respectful Spaces bylaw and the meeting rules of conduct are up on the screens and on posters. The bylaw is on northcowichan.ca. We'll now move on to the approval of the consent agenda, and I'll turn to council to ask if there are any items you'd like removed. I'm going to go to Councillor Callio first because he did contact me before the meeting with an item he'd like removed. Then I'm going to go to Councillor Finley and Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull 2.27.
Yeah, got it. Councillor Finley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull 2.2.3 and 2.2.9 if I'm not jumping on Councillor Justice's
All right,
toes.
I got him. Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull 2.2.4 and 2.2.8.
All right. Perhaps we should discuss what we don't want to pull. I'd like to pull 2.2.6. All right, does someone want to move the recommendation that council approve the consent agenda and the recommendations contained therein? Moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Justice. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to approval of the regular agenda. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Manas, seconded by Councillor Finley. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. I'd now like to move on to my mayor's report, if you just bear with me here for a moment. So I'd like to take a little bit of a different approach with the mayor's report this evening. During our recent council committee meetings, there has been a significant amount of discussion around this table about North Cowichan's plans regarding climate change, including both for mitigation and adaptation. We've also received a great deal of public input on these topics, particularly related to the Zero Carbon Step Code and our climate change adaptation strategy. For the benefit of the new members of council and also for members of the public, I wanted to provide a bit of background on our initiatives related to climate change and why we are pursuing them. I'd like to start with the Climate Action and Energy Plan. North Cowichan first adopted such a plan in 2013. It inventoried the community's existing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions and identified future trends in energy and GHG emissions. It also identified opportunities to reduce energy consumption and emissions through policy and other municipal mechanisms by 80% by 2050. This initial climate action energy plan was developed with over 400 residents participating through a variety of in-person and online engagement tools. Between 2020 and 2022, North Cowichan updated the climate action and energy plan based on new statistical modeling, data analysis, research, and community and stakeholder inputs. The updated Climate Action Energy Plan outlines almost 40 actions grouped under 7 categories to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050, maintaining that initial target from the original 2013 plan. These include achieving energy efficiency and emission reductions by creating compact, complete communities, efficient buildings, including decreasing potential emissions of new buildings, moving to low-carbon transportation through increased use of public transit, more active transportation, increasing renewable local energy generation and procuring more renewable energy, more efficient water usage and waste disposal, and low-carbon industry, agriculture, and forestry. Our updated climate action energy plan is based on the scientific findings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's most recent assessment report, which provides a summary of thousands of scientists' recent climate change studies. The report confirms that greenhouse gas emissions emitted from both human use of fossil fuels are causing unprecedented changes to climate and weather on global and regional scales. In addition, the report confirms that limiting GHG emissions, especially carbon dioxide and methane, and reaching at least net zero emissions will limit global heating and changes to climate. Our climate plan is also based on the direction set at the senior levels of government. In 2007, the province adopted the Climate Change Accountability Act with an expectation that municipalities would reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The reduction targets under this provincial legislation are at least 40% by below 2007 levels by 2030, 60% by 2040, and 80% by 2050. The province subsequently adopted the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030, which provides guidance on emissions reduction efforts, including for local governments. This roadmap has also informed our own climate change efforts. As with the 2013 Climate Action and Energy Plan, public engagement was an important element of updating this document most recently. A live webinar session in July 2020 presented the climate action modeling results and hosted discussion on climate action in North Cowichan. A question and answer document followed this and was posted to the Play Speak Engagement website. A survey in February 2021 focused on climate action prioritization and land use decisions, and the Environmental Advisory Committee and Council also reviewed emission reduction actions and modeling outputs at various stages of the project. The Climate Action Energy Plan recognizes that we are facing a global problem and that any success in mitigating climate change will depend on actions at the international, national, and provincial level. This is recognized by Council, which passed the following resolution before adopting our updated plan. The resolution reads as follows. The municipality will play an important role in implementing the goals of the Climate Action and Energy Plan update. However, we cannot stress strongly enough that its ultimate success will depend on actions from the senior levels of government. If recent history has taught us anything, there is a real risk that our federal and provincial leaders could backtrack on their climate change commitments and fall well short of our greenhouse gas reduction targets. If decision makers in Ottawa and Victoria do not follow through on their environmental promises, then North Cowichan will be unable to meet its target of reducing emissions by 80% by 2050. While recognizing this is a global problem, we have nevertheless made a commitment at this table to do our part in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, like many other communities across BC, Canada, and the world. Obviously, we are too small to solve this problem on our own. However, many of us would argue that if we expect action from the senior levels of government and on the international stage, then it's important that we set the right example here at home. That is the collective position of this council and of this municipality. For any members of council who have a different view on the matter, I would suggest bringing forward a notice of motion to repeal or revise our climate action and energy plan. Unless that happens, our climate change commitments are the official policy of this municipality, and the expectation is that members of council will not undermine these policies once we have debated and adopted them as a democratic body. Once a policy like the Climate Action and Energy Plan is updated, it's our place as council members to question our municipal staff on the science of climate change. Their job is to implement what we determine is a priority at this table, and right now that includes climate change mitigation. For any members of the public who may be in the gallery this evening and have a different view on the matter with regards to our climate change efforts, I'll say this. We live in a free and democratic society, and you're entitled to have your own opinion. However, the group of people you see sitting around the council table were elected by our residents last year to govern on their behalf. The majority of us here are committed to continuing North Cowichan's climate change efforts over the course of our term, and we're clear on that when we ran for office. We welcome your input, but if your goal for us is to totally abandon these initiatives, then I would suggest your best option is to try to elect a different council in the next election. That is the democratic process. I also want to take a moment to differentiate climate change mitigation from adaptation, which came up at the end of one of our most recent meetings. Mitigation refers to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. This is the focus of North Cowichan's Climate Action and Energy Plan. Mitigation typically involves switching from oil, gas, or coal to renewable energy sources or reducing one's energy consumption. Some would argue that we should not, as a municipality or even as a country, be focusing any of our efforts on mitigation owing to our small overall contributions to global greenhouse gas emissions. Adaptation, on the other hand, means adjusting to the impacts of actual or expected future climate, including extreme heat, water shortages and drought, flooding, fires, sea level rise. Whatever one's view may be of the science of climate change, I would think we can all agree that in recent years we have seen major changes in our climate, including more frequent and extreme weather events. We saw this over the past summer with the wildfires and the severe droughts across BC. And we saw it with the heat dome in the atmospheric river in 2021. We can either sit back and watch these changes unfold in our community with major impacts to our homes, businesses, industry, and public infrastructure, or we can take steps to strengthen our resilience to climate change, whether that's undertaking work to reduce the risk of wildfires on Mount Zuhalem, or working with the province and the Halalt Nation to remove sediment from the Chemainus River to reduce the risk of flooding to the nearby properties. North Cowichan is in the process of developing its own climate adaptation strategy, which will include recommendations on how we can adapt to these more frequent and extreme weather events, whether we're talking about wildfires, drought, or floods. The climate adaptation strategy will be done in 3 phases. Phase 1 is understanding the local context and primary concerns. Phase 2 is conducting a vulnerability and risk assessment. And Phase 3 includes developing the actual climate change adaptation strategy. Last week at our committee of the whole meeting, we reviewed an initial report for Phase 1 of this project, which included a summary of engagement with the public and First Nations, interviews with interested parties, and a review of the background literature. Any recommendations for adapting to climate change won't come until Phase 3 of this report, likely sometime in 2024. To be clear, this work of developing a climate adaptation strategy is a priority established by Council and is outlined in our strategic plan. Similar to my comments about the Climate Action and Energy Plan, if there is any member of Council who does not believe this work related to adaptation is a priority, then they are free to bring forward a notice of motion to abandon this project. Until then, we will be moving forward with our climate adaptation strategy. And that concludes my mayor's report. Thank you. We don't have any delegations on today's meeting. We'll now move on to public input. And I just want to stress that public input, again, is an opportunity for members of the public to provide feedback on matters included on the agenda. The maximum number of speakers to be heard during the public input period is limited to 5, with a maximum of 3 minutes allotted to each speaker. Members of the public attending the meeting in person must register at least 10 minutes prior to the meeting by signing a sheet posted outside of council chambers, and members of the public attending electronically must raise their hand once the meeting has been called to order. Instructions can be found on northcowichan.ca/virtual meeting in terms of how to raise your hand. So I will turn to council right now. We do have a policy with regards to the number of speakers. We have some additional folks who have signed the sheet, and I'm going to turn to council to ask if we want to continue with our policy or waive the requirement. I would stress to council, though, the sign-up sheet is all with regards to item 7.2, and while we're free to debate this and to welcome more public input, I would remind council that we have debated this issue, this bylaw, multiple times to date. We've heard a lot of public input on it, but it's ultimately up to council whether we want to continue with our policy or waive it in this particular case.
Mr. Mayor, I think we should let everybody speak as being our past practice.
All right, what's the will of the rest of council? I'm seeing 3 heads nodding.
4.
Is there a 4th head nodding?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see the screen. Councillor Stash?
As I see, we've got that one item later, so at this time, and we had pulled one item, so we'll be able to talk to that subject at that time. So going with what we've done typically, we'll entertain all speakers today.
All right, it's unanimous consent. And bear with me for a sec here, the first name under public input, sorry, my agenda's getting a bit mixed up here. The first name under public input is Paul O'Rourke. Mr. O'Rourke, if you come up to the lectern and state your name and address, and I know you know the drill, but 3 minutes.
Paul O'Rourke, Shemaine.
I'm gonna reset your time. Yeah.
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, I have spoken here before. I'm sure you're aware of my position here. And I would like to, first of all, say, if I ask any questions during my 3 minutes, they're not rhetorical. I'm giving you a heads up for what I'm likely to ask a specific person during question time. So, I'm going to assert that we have well and truly established with a lot of people coming here that this climate change is not going to benefit anybody in North Cowichan. It's not going to benefit anyone in the entire world. And the cult of climate change appears to be representative of people that aren't actually typically North Cowichan residents. And I'm particularly concerned about this because I asked council who benefits from this stuff and was told it's rhetorical. It's not rhetorical. And here's my problem. If you can't actually put your finger on, if you can't name which particular North Cowichan residents will benefit from this, and more importantly, how they will benefit from this, then I question very seriously whether you are representing your constituents. Because we've very clearly made this very clear that this doesn't benefit the people of North Cowichan. So to vote for something that is harmful to your electorate is not, to my mind, democracy. So if the people that benefit, and this is why I'm asking, I want you to actually be able to tell me who would benefit. If it's the name of a North Cowichan resident, you can tell me how. Because my assertion is the only people who will benefit from this are not North Cowichan, whether they're from another provincial government or a federal government or an international organisation whose agenda is to push this climate change nonsense. If you are listening to these people and not the people of North Cowichan, you are acting as a foreign agent. You have an obligation to represent the people of North Cowichan, not international communities. Now, Mr. Mayor, I understand that you've said that you're going to stick to this decision regardless. I don't understand how that's democracy. You yourself actually mentioned in a recent meeting that you didn't see any point in any of this back and forth because there are 4 members here of this council who have predetermined their position. And that's not democracy. We all came here to be as respectful as we could, and with the exception of a few very well-funded, internationally backed people who are presenting extremely questionable science that I can challenge any of it, we've rebutted. So, I'm not sure.
Mr. O'Rourke,
time is up, and
we're at
I
time.
will ask questions.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
And I would like you to think about it.
Thank you. I'll next invite up Adriana Richards. Ms. Richards, if you could state your name and address.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. It's Adriana at Fairview. I'd like to speak personally on item 2.2.9. I don't understand Mr. Rustad's letter. First of all, our mayor has always been very generous to allow as many speakers as needed, therefore allowing all voices to be heard. Second, the few names that were written in the same writing were mine, and all the people but one were standing right there with me, and I was showing them how you sign in to speak to council. One person was racing from work. I appreciate moving the meetings from 3 to 5. However, many people get off at 5, and the working class of the valley deserve a voice too. On behalf of COPE, I'd speak on item 7.2. I'll not rehash all I've spoken on before, from the biased, statistically irrelevant survey to the benefits and lies around natural gas. I'll speak to the reasons that were used to override the public input last meeting. One councillor stated that it was not a ban and it could still be used as backup. Fortis will not hook up for a little fireplace. This is not financially viable move on their part, and no builder will pay for a hookup for a fireplace after paying BC Hydro over $50,000 for one transformer. This will lead to people depending on other secondary heating cooking sources like propane and diesel gas generators that have higher carbon footprints. We live in a rural area with overhead power lines and need backup heat. By next year, step 4, it will be a ban as local governments are not working on using their waste to produce enough RNG for new homes. Another councillor stated that this was not a retroactive ban. While correct, the CAPE that is being used to push this through does in fact have a plan to retrofit old homes and remove gas furnaces when they reach the end of age. Finally, the CAPE plan was used to override public opinion as if it were a bylaw, which it is not. CAPE was updated again after the municipality declared a climate emergency. This declaration holds no legal weight as a local emergency, can only be called for 7 days. It can then be extended with a minister's approval. As far as we can see, these steps were never taken. So in essence, it's just a random declaration based on a letter with a few signatures and science from the United Nations that the climate specialists alluded to in the last meeting, called the IPCC, who has since changed its data included in that letter, yet no amendments have been made to our local climate action plan. Creating a dependency on a monopoly that is highly vulnerable to weather, cyber attacks, and the ability to price gauge is not ethical. COPE is here just to bear witness, because I know what you feel, and officially oppose these bylaws attached to CAPE. Thank you.
Thank you. And then move on to the next speaker, Joe Enslow. Mr. Enslow, if you could come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Thank you. Yeah, Joseph Enslow here, Lane Road, North Cowichan. So obviously I'm here to speak on 7.2. Most of us are. Really, my only feedback about it is not really about like left or right or corporate versus environment, nothing like that. Like I understand that our municipality is going to move forward with some benefits to one side, some benefits to the other side. I totally get that. The corporate environment that I've been in for almost 2 decades goes through a lot of change management. There's always a stakeholder, there's always a group that has a problem, and in order for us to tackle that problem, we have to make changes. Those changes subsequently affect other departments, other stakeholders. So essentially, before that we do anything, we strive to get everybody at the table to understand if we do X, what will happen? If we do Y, what will happen? And after all that input and stuff comes forward, we decide what makes the most sense going forward. For change control, the biggest thing that I've seen in almost 20 years is that people get fatigued. You just get tired out. When we focus on one change more often than any other change, eventually that group that always pays the price, has the weight on their shoulders, whatever, that group eventually needs a voice at the table. And as the business moves forward, even if our focus for the moment is climate, does that mean we have no focus on housing or economics, sustainability, or any of the other things? We also have different relationships that we're currently building. Fortis, for example, is part of our Canadian energy sector. They have a plan that goes all the way to 2050 to use renewables for natural gas. Eventually, renewables will be more than what, call it the legacy fuels would be. But if we start demonizing potential partners by ruling them out, like we're going to have to rebuild those relationships later. The entire argument is not really about climate versus anything else, because for all of us to live, some kind of emission, some sort of exhaust needs to be created. In order for us to move forward as an entire community, we should strive to get everybody at the table. To hear that we're leaning on policies that we started working on 10 years ago, I still think it's crucial that we follow through with those, because to undo 10 years of taxpayer money and effort and staff, like I understand that that's also a huge effort. I just find that lately, especially in the last few months, where, call it, emotions are getting higher, we're almost protecting that we have to move this climate agenda forward. And I would just like council to please remember that while we are protecting the policies we're trying to push forward, we are forgetting about some of the voices that are getting impacted by that weren't impacted by that 10 years ago. And if we stop getting feedback from those voices now, we'll roll all these things forward and leave a lot of people behind. So please don't forget about the other side. Thank you.
Thank you. Now move on to the next speaker, Jane Kilthey. Ms. Kilthey, if you come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Mayor Douglas, members of council, I'm Jane Kilthey. I live on Pritchard Road in Cowichan Bay and volunteer with the local Cowichan Climate Hub. Speaking to item 7.1, I want to acknowledge Council's climate leadership in moving forward with building bylaw number 3932 at level EL4 under BC's Zero Carbon Step Code, reducing emissions in new construction as of July 1, 2024. You joined Victoria, the municipality of Saanich, Nanaimo, in leading the way in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the built environment. This will encourage other BC cities and towns to use these zero carbon step code tools for BC local governments to reduce emissions. I've heard some say that given the rate of construction of new homes, this won't make much difference. Yet consider that every home built under this bylaw will not only reduce emissions in the year it's built, but for every year of its life. Each year into the future, there will be more low-carbon houses and apartments with minimal emissions. Those homes will be heated and cooled by electric heat pumps, protecting people from both cold weather to quite a low degree, and will be protecting them from increasing extreme summer heat that we're now experiencing. Switching to a heat pump in my own home reduced our energy costs. The code also supports wood stoves in homes as backup in power outages if gas is not connectable. Reducing methane gas emissions, which are 80 times more potent than CO2, is a major step in reducing climate disruption and will help North Cowichan meet its greenhouse gas emission reduction commitments. We also know from multiple studies that eliminating gas from homes reduces the risk of asthma and childhood leukemia for children living in those homes. And whatever Fortis wants you to believe, so-called renewable natural gas from burning garbage is still methane, with the same climate, greenhouse gas emissions, and health risks of their current product. Clean energy in our homes and in many places is the way forward. There are many of us here tonight in support of this bylaw who are grateful for your work as a council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, Terry Young. Sarah, if you come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Mayor Douglas, Council, Terry Young, Cowichan Bay Road, Cowichan Bay. Excuse my voice, I actually have asthma, which I didn't have. I live in a house that had a gas furnace in it, which I took out about, well, just before the heat dome. Took it out, put in solar panels, took out my gas furnace, thank heavens, put in a heat pump, which was such a lovely thing to do because I had air conditioning in a very old farmhouse. I had to retrofit my house when I did that, and I'm really glad I did, because I feel that for the future generations, it's important that we model what we want to have. I have a son who lives in North Cowichan. He moved into a brand new condo. That condo is supplied with a gas fireplace, and I was really upset for him that he didn't have any choice. He couldn't actually buy the condo without buying the condo with the gas fireplace. And so I am speaking to this new building bylaw because I think that you're moving in the right direction. As Ms. Kilty says, what we build today is what is going to be here for the next, hopefully, 50 or 100 years. I live in a 100-year-old farmhouse that now is going to be a place that hopefully will look after itself for the next 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Now move on to the next speaker, Peter Nix. Mr. Nix, if you come up to the lectern and state your name and address.
Hi, Council. Peter Nix, Hood Road. First of all, I just want to thank you for your efforts on behalf of the Climate Change and Action Plan and to express my appreciation for all the work that you're doing. To my fellow citizens who sometimes don't appreciate you quite as much as I do, I would like to advise them that I'm an ex-scientist. I used to work for the oil sands, and I quit that job because I realized 20 years ago that climate change was a real problem, and working for the oil sands was not helping. Most scientists have declared climate change an emergency. Many councils, many people in the public, as the mayor has said, have understood that climate change is an emergency. When an ambulance comes up behind your car and sounds its siren, you pull over, you change your behavior because it's an emergency. I'm a microbiologist, actually. 200 years ago, there were riots in France and England about the smallpox vaccine and about putting chlorine in water. Towns rioted. There was a huge struggle, and it took decades to get the message and the action across that we need chlorine in water and we need a smallpox vaccine for the public good. So I would like to remind people that this is for the public good. Thank you.
All right, just remind everyone, I know there's a lot of different opinions in the gallery, but if we can just keep the background noise to a minimum, I'd really appreciate that. We can move on to the next speaker now. Pat Cruikshank. Ms. Cruikshank, if you come up to the lectern, state your name and address, and again, it's 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Pat Cruikshank on Lochside Drive in Duncan. You might remember me. I was here a couple weeks ago. I'm the grandma that likes to stay warm in the winter, and I like to have options to do it. Like most of you, many of you, you're doers, you're organizers. You like to get things done. You like to help the community. For the last 50 years, I have been a doer, involved in a lot of children's programs, women's programs, and I've arranged a lot of things. I have youth and ladies retreats, week-long soccer camps, kids programs for the whole summer where I hired 4 or 5 university students to work with me. Done community talent nights, fundraisers, car rallies. And in doing that, I have been the chair of all kinds of committees. And I've had huge agendas, and of course they all start months ahead of all these events to get them done. So I know what it's like to sit and be in charge of and make things happen and make the decisions to get something happen on time, do it right, and a benefit to people. And I know also that good feeling when you take an item and you get it done and it's off the agenda and you can move on to the mundane things, especially the key things. For me, they would be locating places, venues, and hiring staff or hiring people, things. For you, it's these kind of decisions that you're making, and they're huge, and they affect a lot of people. Mine affected 100-200 people at a time. You're affecting thousands and thousands of people, and for generations. Mine was just one-time events. And so I know the burden on you, but I got thinking about that, and I was wondering, because of the climate change and the push and the information is beyond, just beyond, that maybe even subconsciously, and you're not aware of it, that you kind of want to get this one off the agenda quickly because it's a burden and it's contentious, and you just want to get it done and move on to the mundane. And I'd like to say, especially because of the affordable housing issue in this valley, that you step back and pause and don't push this through to step 3 and step 4. Give the builders a couple of years, because what we're going to do if you do this isn't going to make such a radical change in those 4 years as much as getting some affordable housing built now. Give the builders 3 or 4 years, and if you want to do this, move to step 4 like the government suggested in 5 or 6 years, not now. My granddaughter got married this last weekend. 3 of her bridesmaids had to come back from Alberta to BC, who were raised here in the valley, to attend that wedding, and they moved to Alberta. Why? Because it's more affordable. We're losing the next generation of young people and workers. I have 8 grandchildren in this valley. I want to see them have a place to live that they can afford and that has good housing, good heating options. And so please just be cautious in your decision. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now move on to the next speaker, David Slade. Mr. Slade, if you come to the lectern, state your name and address.
Hello there, David Slade, 3265 Cobble Hill Road, Cobble Hill. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and respected councillors, for allowing me to speak, and thank you for considering advancing the provincial step code to step 4. For me, this is about sustainability and climate change. We have seen unprecedented extreme weather events in recent years, floods, fires, heat domes, and drought. Just recently, 36 days of pumping over the weir in Cowichan Lake to keep the Cowichan River alive. Climate scientists have told us to expect this for 20 years now. And they tell us that if we don't change our trajectory, we should expect not this business as usual, but we should expect much worse. I would like to touch on some of the co-benefits of getting fossil fuels out of our homes. Improved air quality, no carbon monoxide, no nitrous oxides, no benzene, toluene, or microscopic particles that are potential carcinogens and harmful to children's health. The ability for heat pumps to cool as well as heat, potentially saving lives in heat domes. Greatly reduced life cycle heating costs for our homes, saving a precious non-renewable resource for future generations, and reducing the need for fracking and all of the accompanying environmental harm that goes with that. I have heard it suggested that bold moves by North Cowichan will have no global effect. It is like removing one drop of oil from a barrel. But if we don't do what is in our power, how can we expect others to do their part? Bravery is contagious, and your actions will inspire others in our region and beyond to follow suit. They will also be drops out of that same barrel. But though the barrel may be full right now, there's nothing in it but drops. So if everybody does their part, we can achieve something. If nobody does their part, we achieve nothing. On behalf of my grandchildren, all of them who live in this region, several in North Cowichan, I want to support and encourage you to pursue sustainability and climate action. I have heard it said from some that when North Cowichan sneezes, the CVRD gets a cold. I would like to suggest that in this case, when North Cowichan shines, the CVRD might just get a nice tan. Thank you.
Thank you. Now move on to the next speaker. Robert Thompson, Mr. Sorry, man. Mr. Thompson, if you could come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Robert Thompson of Neville Lane Drive in North Cowichan. I would like to follow on a couple of things from last week. I trust that you all were circulated the information that I sent from scientists who actually have some real science other than the political science of the IPCC. I did circulate that. Hopefully somebody's had a chance to look at it. I'd like to follow on with what Mr. Enslow was talking about tonight in terms of benefit to people in the valley to whom you have some obligation. The cost of hydro, I was going to give you a comparison. I didn't have time last week, but we have a house that's been heat pumped, was built in 1991, runs about $450 a month of electricity in the winter time, $130 in the summertime. My friends in Duncan, who have a smaller house, 1,900 square feet, heat and hot water and cook on natural gas. They run $35 a month in the summertime, $100 in the winter because that's their heating season, and $45 for their electricity, which runs their stereos and washer and dryer. So you're looking at a considerable imposition on people by removing their actual choice. In my case, I had to replace the heat pump system, $17,000. Now, the last one I had to do was a mere $5,000, but because the refrigerants have been replaced from our 410A, which is a hydrofluorocarbon, to our 454A, which is a hydrofluoroolefin and is more flammable, the whole system had to be taken down, not just the compressor that was broken. So this is a consideration. You're imposing this, and you know that every 10 years they will make up some new fluoro goo to put in them. You're proposing that we organize ourselves into have a single point source for failure, which is the hydro system. People die in the cold. People are uncomfortable in the in the heat, and people die because they don't have enough money to heat, not because there isn't any heat around. I was going to suggest two things, that maybe the council members could take a 4-minute break sometime, have a listen to Sir Joseph Porter's song When I Was a Lad from Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore, and that the truly committed
Mr.
shower
Thompson.
cold.
We're at time. Thank you. Our next speaker, Diana Hardacker. Come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Diana Hardacre. I live on Channel Boulevard in Chemainus, North Cowichan. And I just want to say right from the get-go that myself and my children and my grandchildren will benefit,
Diana,
benefit by the decisions that this council makes.
I just want to stress, we try to encourage
sorry.
everyone to address council rather than the gallery.
And I strongly support this bylaw. I'm exceptionally pleased, Mayor, your mayor's report brought tears to my eyes, because I really wondered if I'd ever see the day when this council took climate change seriously, and I'm ecstatic that you are, and I can't thank you enough. I'm very, very pleased that you're working towards reducing our community's carbon footprint. I congratulate you. The zero carbon bylaw at level E, EL4, promoting electrification versus fossil fuels is an excellent, excellent idea, and I just so strongly support you on this. I have 5 children, 5 grandchildren, and another one on the way. And I want them to have a livable future, and your decision to support this bylaw, which I hope you will affect them profoundly and allow them the possibility of a better future. And it's not just about the people. Human beings are affected by climate change, but also plants are, and so are animals. Just watch the documentaries about the elephants that are dying of thirst, the polar bears that are drowning because it's farther and farther between ice flows. Your decision will help the plants and animals as well, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the next speaker, Ruth Waddell. Ms. Waddell, if you could come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Good evening, I'm Ruth Waddell. I live down in Cowichan Station. I had some points to make here, but I'd like to address something that I just feel like there is an elephant in the room. A recent BC Hydro report on their website states, and I quote, "People who rely on gas heaters may be contributing to global warming by using them during cold weather, when they could instead be using electricity or propane." It didn't make any sense to me that they would say that until I read a recent article that was just published yesterday on the 17th in Verge, and then it made a lot of sense to me. According to the International Energy Agency report, government and utilities need to add or replace all the world's power grids by 2040 to reliably keep the lights on. Just the lights on? Today's aging grids are often teetering on the edge of power shortages, something that could become an even bigger problem as homes, businesses, buildings, and transportation all go electric. The grids are the weakest link that are not getting any attention. Now I know why Hydro thinks we should still have propane.
Thank you. Now move on to the next speaker, Steve Lay. Mr. Lay, if you come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
Stephen Lay, Chaplain Street, Crofton. I wasn't going to sing for you tonight, but the Sullivan reference, communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown, drive me insane. You know, I hope that's what it really is a communication breakdown. Because I don't think there's anyone in this room who's thinking, we should go back 100 years and cut down all the big trees that are gone now, most of them. And then we see how our NDP government guards Fairy Creek for us. You know, there's a reason for maintaining the old growth forest. There's certainly trees that need to come down in those places. But to the point at hand of whether speeding up this agenda item or not makes sense, and whether, you know, I fear that what we're really looking at here is the law of unintended consequences. And the one thing that I, you know, appreciate a lot of what the mayor mentioned in his address, but, you know, the thing that I didn't hear mentioned was the people. It's all about government. And the fact of the matter is that unless you have people on the side of it, I don't know. I mean, a lot of us didn't go to the patch to make their money, don't have home equity. I mean, I'll state for the record, a 5 o'clock start time for those of us who are trying to scrape together nickels to get by is inconvenient. Didn't leave me any time to prepare what I was going to say tonight, which hopefully I can not say anything that will violate the standards of fairness. And yet, when we hear from council that, in fact, they're going to speed up the timeline for which the populace voted or they didn't, I'm left questioning how this is fair, how it's democratic, and how it's going to bring the people on the side of these decisions. Because again, you know, I work blue collar, I'm an academic, or a family of academics anyway, and one thing I've seen is that when people are pushed and forced to do things, boy, they got a lot of ways to screw things up. And the other thing that I've noticed a lot, working everywhere, is this tendency to rush into error with the best intentions so often. We got to get it done. All right, go. But without the proper, you know, parameters and guidelines and information, which, looking at the IPCC and understanding that they disqualified any model that didn't show the catastrophic climate change happening. And I don't think anyone would say that human beings don't have an impact on the environment. But the question is how can we make sure that what we do going forward doesn't make matters worse?
Thank you. And I move on to the last speaker, Catherine Wallace. Ms. Wallace, if you come up to the lectern, state your name and address.
My name's Catherine Wallace, and I live Shawnigan Mill Bay Road in Mill Bay. Change is difficult. It is human nature to resist change. Change is difficult at the best of times. After this summer of fire and drought, it is obvious we are not in the best of times. Scientists are stipulating the changes we must make now to curb the climate catastrophes we are experiencing each season. We must reduce our greenhouse gases. Adopting the new provincial energy step code is a brilliant start to the changes we must make. I applaud this council for addressing these difficult issues in often controversial circumstances. I have respect for your thoughtful decision-making capabilities for the good of the Cowichan Valley people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can now move on to bylaws, and oh, of course, thank you, Councillor Manhas. I'm going to turn to IT staff and just ask if there are any online or virtual participants with their hands raised.
Mr. Mayor, there is, and I will unmute them now.
Hi, this is Judy Stafford. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I've got quite a few Zooms going on at the same time right now. I'm actually supposed to be in my AGM, so I was not able to attend in person. So thank you for letting me dial in quickly. I just wanted to address 8.1, which is our development permit that's coming in front of you tonight. And I just want to express our gratitude for all the work from staff, specifically Rick Bundridge, who got saddled with our file, and Bob Conway. I just wanted to express my gratitude for all the work we've done on this file, and for North Cowichan for your support ongoing with this project. And so that's just what I wanted to mention before you get to that agenda item. And then also I will be available in case there are any questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, we can now move on to bylaws. We have 3 bylaws before us this evening. As a council, we're free to debate these as is typical when a bylaw is brought before this body. However, I would caution that my experience at this table for almost a decade is that we typically focus our debate on first to three readings rather than adoption. However, that's a practice here at this council. It's not a rule. So if anyone wants to weigh in on any of these bylaws before us, you have every right to do so. But I just would ask to perhaps not repeat all the arguments we've heard in the previous meetings, and maybe try to focus on new information. But that's up to you as members of council to decide how you want to approach it. So we'll move to item 7.1. Over to you, Ms. Martina.
Okay, permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3928 received first three readings on September 26. As per section 227 of the Community Charter, the bylaw may only be adopted after public notice has been given. That notice was given in accordance with North Cowichan's public notice bylaw on September 27th by posting the notice on the website and the notice board and through social media on September 28th. And it was published in the October 5th editions of the Cowichan Valley Citizen and the Chemainus Valley Courier. If adopted, the bylaw will exempt 147 properties from the municipal property taxation in 2024. The recommendation is that council adopt permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3928, 2023.
Thank you. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Callio, seconded by Councillor Finlay. Any discussion? Councillor Stash?
Yeah, Your Worship, typically with the dollar values, is that something that for the public, if they want to look at, is it typically not on Schedule A and Schedule B, but rather within the annual taxes? Just seeing that I see this here, and I know in our background documents in the discussion part, we had dollar values in there that we could see, but here in the actual schedules that are attached to the bylaw, there's no dollar values, just the roll numbers. So I didn't know if that was relevant to that, or I know it's probably typically captured, it's in our budget where it's captured for the public, but I was just curious on that.
Turn to the corporate officer, Ms. Aldara.
So the dollar values would change every year, and so we do publish it as part of our annual report every year, which is freely available on our website.
Yeah, I was just looking for the clarification.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor and oppose? Motion carries. We now move on to item 7.2. Someone like to move the recommendation or some alternative? Oh, yeah, please, over to you, Ms. Martineau, to provide the preamble.
Okay, so building amendment bylaw number 3932 received first three readings on October 4th. If adopted, the bylaw will replace sections 15 sub 3 and 19.1 in building bylaw 3932 by including the full range of building inspections undertaken during the building process, applying the energy step code as specified under the BC Building Code, and applying emission level 3 of the BC Zero Carbon Step Code for new residential buildings and buildings 4 stories or taller, effective January 1st, 2024, and increasing it to emission level 4, effective July 1st, 2024. Also would like to note at this time that there was a typo in the bylaw under section 3 for bullet 19.1A, which read greenhouse gas omission. It should say greenhouse gas emission. So this typo will be corrected before the bylaw is signed and before the bylaw the building bylaw is consolidated and uploaded to the website. So the recommendation is that council adopt building amendment bylaw number 3932, 2023.
I've got Councillor Finlay as the mover.
I've got a question before.
Yeah.
Not moving this. If for some reason this recommendation, the adoption doesn't happen, does this kill the bylaw, or does it send it back for the discussion, for the readings? How does this actually work in the hopes that we don't adopt?
I'm going to turn the corporate officer to walk us through the process.
Okay, so if council moves the motion to adopt and then that motion is then defeated, the bylaw is killed. The bylaw cannot be reintroduced again as it is currently written during the reconsideration period, which is 30 days from today's meeting. It could be reintroduced down the line again, but however, if council wants to further amend the bylaw, then council should, rather than giving the bylaw adoption, they should refer it back to staff with direction on what they want changed.
Mr. Finley?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move the motion to refer this back to staff for further discussion on a revision to the bylaw.
All right, it's been referred. Do we have a seconder? So your hands went up at the same time. Okay, Councilor Manhas, you're closer. All right, you're the seconder. All right, do we have to debate this, or we've debated this a lot? I don't know if we're gonna have any new arguments. So call the question. Yeah. So, Councilor Finley.
I would like to say something. The reason why I want to send it back
Yeah.
to staff is, well, I've got a page and a half of notes, but I'll go to one topic right now, which is, you know, we've moved this thing at lightning speed. And when we were just a little under a year ago in councillor training, Mr. Swaby actually said, you cannot move government that fast. It's like a tanker, and making that tanker turn takes time. And we've basically made this tanker turn down a 90-degree in weeks without enough public involvement, without any building industry involvement. And as several speakers spoke tonight and last time, this is going to make such a massive change. So the reason that I'd like to send it back to staff is to amend what we're doing here, and perhaps as Mrs. Cruikshank said, perhaps not as fast. Maybe we need to go at 3 and 4 years, not 6 years ahead of time. So that's the reason why I'd like to send it back to staff.
Thanks, Councillor Finley. Okay, I'm hoping we can call the question now on referring this back to staff. All in favor? And opposed? The Mayor, Councillors Justice, Toporowski, and Estache opposed. The motion's defeated. You're next on the speakers list, Councillor Estache, and then
Motion to adopt.
to adopt the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Justice. Any discussion? Councillor Finley, and then Councillor Justice, and then Councillor Manhas. If we could keep it concise, but it's up to you as individual members of council.
So I've only got a page, not 3 pages this time. Several things I might reiterate, and I apologize ahead of time, but we have heard from many members of the public who are against this acceleration of the zero carbon step code. We've had zero input from the building community, other than comments I've shared regarding cost escalations due to the increase of thousands of dollars per living space of extra costs. We're going to push commercial developments out of North Cowichan because several commercial developments that we may have coming up will include restaurants, and restaurants need gas. You can't cook a good steak without gas. I've said that before. If we're going to push this forward and we can't have natural gas, or we can't have gas backup fireplaces in new subdivisions, which is basically what Fortis has told us, they will not run lines to new subdivisions. People will put wood-burning fireplaces as backup. They will put propane fireplaces as backup. And I don't think anybody that wants this escalation, this acceleration to move forward, wants to see propane trucks driving every single week, spewing pollutants out of their truck to deliver propane to houses, because people will have backup heating, backup fireplaces, and wood burning, as we all know, is way worse than natural gas and propane. Again, making these changes in North Cowichan is expecting to make a dent in the 0.000000144% of greenhouse gases. I think is insanity. Just a couple points about the grid. This grid is not going to be able to sustain this in the future. BC Hydro has planned the grid based on the step codes and the emissions that are set out by the province. And if all of our communities and cities keep pushing these forward, the grid will not be able to handle it. And one of the things I found interesting in Kansas in the past month, Panasonic was building a $4 billion EV battery facility to build EV batteries. They don't have the grid for it, so they had to extend the coal-burning power plant 5 years from its de-escalation in order to feed that. That's going to happen here. If we keep pushing the accelerations forward, then we're going to have more coal-burning, natural gas-burning power plants to maintain. We don't have the hydro, we don't have the renewables to get us where we need to be. Germany put the bet on renewables. Their costs are 4 times higher than us on electricity. And now they're kicking coal-burning power plants back up. In 2022, California told its residents not to charge EVs a week after it banned internal combustion motors, cars, as the grid would be strained and they would encounter rolling brownouts and periodic blackouts. And we're going to have the same thing here. We're not ready to go fully electric on anything, I believe, in North Cowichan especially. And I don't think we should be the leaders on this. I think we should see how other communities are doing it. We should watch what Victoria is doing. Maybe Vancouver might do it. They haven't done it yet. They're the biggest city in the province. You know, we are leading the way apparently on an electric garbage truck, which I'm 100% against as well. And I'd rather not be the leaders in this case too. Thank you.
Councillor Justice, Councillor Manhas, and we spent hours debating this. I think we've all got pretty strong views on it already, and I doubt we're going to persuade one another to change our minds, but I'll turn to you, Councillor Justice and Manhas, and ask you to keep it concise, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just really want to thank all the people who have taken the time to come and speak to council on this issue. I really appreciated the divergent views and been very impressed with the respectful tone and sometimes musical tone. I really think that we've discussed this long enough. It's the culmination of years, not weeks, not days of thought. We've been thinking about this, navel gazing, engaging the community, and I'm ready to vote for its adoption.
Councillor Manhas, perhaps to close.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. I just want to iterate a couple of points that I mentioned those last week too, at the last meeting, and you know, we're taking away. I'm going to be voting against this motion because we're taking away choice, individual liberties, and how they want to live their lives. Affordability. We have an affordability issue, as Ms. Cruikshank said earlier, and you know, we're just adding to the inaffordability by doing the 6 years ahead of the provincial mandated timelines, and also the lack of consultation with builders and the business sector. I think that not having consultation with that group, I think, was the biggest flaw in this and moving this forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Manhas. So I'm gonna, okay with council, I'm gonna call the question then. So on the motion as moved and seconded, all in favor? And opposed? Councillors Finley, Callio, and Manhas opposed. The motion carries. We'll now move on to item 7.3. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so zoning amendment bylaw number 3933 is before council for first and second readings. The bylaw proposes to amend section 53 in zoning bylaw number 2950 to include 7495 Relke Road under subsection 4 sub E as a property that may have a maximum of 2 dwelling units within a maximum of 2 residential buildings in order to permit a detached accessory dwelling unit to be constructed on the property. The recommendation is that council, 1, give first and second readings of zoning amendment bylaw number 3933 2022, and 2, authorize a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 3933 2023.
Councillor Finley.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
It's been moved. Seconded by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess our rural lands policy requires a second dwelling to be limited to 90 square meters, which this is. But it's on top of a garage, which adds another 90 square meters to the building itself, which I guess is fine, because I think that in that zone they can build a garage, and so all we're really doing is locating a second dwelling on top of a garage. But I'm wondering, is there anything that would prevent the garage downstairs being converted to living space and effectively doubling the size of the second dwelling?
Mr. Conway. Mr. Conway.
Thanks, hello, Mayor and Council. Yeah, in order to do that legally, there would need to be a building permit, and the zoning would restrict them from doing that. So it could be done, but not lawfully. So we do sometimes see that, but we would be clear when issuing the building permit that the total size cannot exceed 90 square meters, and any expansion of residential use into that lower level would not be permitted by the zoning.
Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion? Councillor Stash?
Just a quick comment on this. In the previous municipality that I was a councillor in, we actually incentivized this because we had a housing crisis there, and we incentivized the local residents to build garages with lofts above. Because of course so many people were building garages, and we saw it was a waste of resources not to have a perfect opportunity there. So just something to think about when we go forward with our upcoming zoning and affordable housing policy. This was something in the previous municipality I was on that we put a tax incentive to homeowners to create long-term rental housing.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to reports. Item 8.1, over to you, Mr. Swaby.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. 8.1 is the development permit application for 2431 Beverly Street. The purposes of the application is for the development permit with a variance for constructing a food processing and innovative hub facility at the above address noted. The recommendation from staff is that council approve application DP 000321 and authorize the issuance of a development permit for 2431 Beverly Street for a food processing and innovation hub facility, and grant a variance to section 17 of the zoning bylaw number 2950 to relax the development standards for off-street parking.
Councillor Justice, to move or a question?
I just want to move the recommendation.
It's been moved. Seconder. Seconded by Councillor Callio. Any discussion? Councillor Finlay?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote against this. I have several concerns out of the staff report. Is this really the right spot for an agricultural processing facility? You know, the hydrologist identified significant risk, this development to the groundwater, which is a big red flag for me. You know, one of the comments in the staff report said that we wouldn't hold the nonprofit to the same standard. So it's going to have a lesser standard as far as building site and landscape design than a regular developer, and I think the standards are there for a reason. We should hold all developments to that same standard. And a variance, you know, to have constant vehicular traffic. I'm just glad I said vehicular right, because I was struggling with that last night. It really should have a paved parking lot, especially so close to the schools. The dust and exhaust are a concern, I think, to the children's breathing welfare in the area. There's going to be lots of delivery and truck traffic to that area, which is going to kick up a lot of dust if it's not paved. And there's already a lot of traffic in that area on Beverly Street. And creating a new zone doesn't seem to make sense here when we won't approve a residential zone a kilometer up the hill on Wicks Road. And there's lots of concerns here for me, so I will definitely not be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Did I see another hand go up? Councillor Stash?
Thank you, Rich. I was reading through the documents. Was a bit of this the result of the work that the Barry O'Riordan was doing with regards to agriculture and the ECDEV sector of the CVRD?
No, I mean, I'll turn to staff to weigh in on this, but this goes back to, I know my first term on council, but it was 2015 when the municipality worked out the arrangement with the Cowichan Green community for the long-term lease of the site.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious, just for a little more information there. We really saw what the cow co-op and the Cowichan Green community during the pandemic, the shift to local agriculture and sustainability. So it's no wonder that this is happening now.
Councillor Callio?
I just have one quick question, thank you, Mayor, and that is, how long is the lease for this property?
I believe it's a 2041. Is that? I think it was 20-year lease.
I don't know offhand, maybe Mr. Conway does.
Yeah, was in the staff report. I believe it's 2041 with options to renew for 3 5-year terms.
I have one more question, if
Yeah,
that's okay.
of course.
What happens to the building if they decide not to renew their lease? Does that become the municipality's property as we own the land?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? It's been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? And oppose? Councillors Finlay and Mann has to oppose. The motion carries. We'll now move on to item 8.2. Over to you, Mr. Swaby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 8.2 is the strategic plan update for 2023 for quarter 3. And the recommendation is that council receive for information the council strategic plan 3rd quarter update, July 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2023.
Councillor Justice?
I do have a question about some items in the quarter 3 update, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
I'd like to, I think these probably are best answered by somebody from the environmental department. If somebody's on and listening, I suppose somebody is. At our last meeting, a former councillor who is here appeared to be unaware of some of the progress that we were making on parrot's feather problem and the issues of dealing with cyanobacteria in Cowichan Lake. And so I've got a couple of broad questions for staff aimed at highlighting what is being reported here in the quarter 3 report on these environmental issues and what's being achieved by environmental staff. So the first one is the report notes that working with the Somnos Management Society, Wildlife Management Society, staff conducted a parrot's feather cutting program this summer, aimed at improving fish habitat, and also monitored the survival of 750 trees and shrubs, the reporting of which had been recorded in the earlier, the Q2 update, I guess. So I wonder whether staff could elaborate on that parrot's feather work and the progress that we're making on that for the benefit of people who aren't aware.
Mr. Conway or Preakshaw.
Dr. Preakshaw.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, the parrot's feather work that Councillor Justice refers to is part of the service agreement that we entered into with the Somnos Marsh Wildlife Society. And I should point out that the parrot's feather removal in particular is not only a fish habitat issue, which is close to Somnos Marsh's goals, but also helps improve our goals of improving water quality and improving drainage in the area, as the parrot's feather is a major source of impediment to water movement at all. This past summer, we helped obtain permission from the province to engage in a parrot's feather removal exercise, which typically the province policy is against. And the Somnos Marsh Wildlife Society was able to maintain a 2-meter wide channel for about an 800-meter stretch to either side of the area, approximately around York Road. And what they are preparing for us right now is a report which outlines the program that was done this summer, the effects on water quality and drainage of that program, and a determination of whether or not that work should be continued next year or even expanded. And we'll be reporting back to council with our recommendation on what to do about that. But our initial impression is that a very large portion of parrot's feather was successfully removed, and this kind of work points to an interim way of dealing with parrot's feather along the road to our long-term plan, which is using the reestablishment of riparian forests and trees to shade out the area. With respect to the second question on blue-green algae control, this summer has really helped us cement our understanding of the mechanisms linking temperature, oxygen, and phosphate to blue-green algae production. We believe we now have a solid understanding of the mechanisms governing those linkages, and that we'll be able to go forward in hiring a consultant to look at oxygenation options that are available to us, what the costs of those management policies are, and what the monitoring looks like to check the progress of such a program. And partly in pursuit of that, staff is looking to organize a tour of the oxygenator that was just installed in Elk Lake, potentially with council members in attendance, to talk to Capital Regional District staff about the oxygen system that was installed, costs that were associated with setup, and expected staffing and management required to keep the equipment in operation.
Follow up?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I've got one more question. This one's for me, though.
All right.
Well, no, it's just for my benefit. The report notes that as a final step in the biodiversity assessment, that there were meetings with staff from a number of First Nations. I just wonder whether we could have a little bit of elaboration on how those meetings went and whether we'll be following up with First Nations on the biodiversity policy.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The terms of reference for the biodiversity protection policy outlined a desire to engage with First Nations as part of the assessment phase of the report. North Cowichan staff and Diamond Head staff met with representatives from 3 of 5 First Nations that were contacted in late September, and we are in the process of putting that feedback together in a what we heard report that we'll be sending back to First Nations, and we'll be providing advice to senior management and talking to senior management about how to proceed with that, and then going on to completing the policy development phase. So our anticipation is that the assessment phase report should be done as soon as we can confirm with First Nations what we heard part of that engagement, and we can determine that once that's in place, that we're able to proceed with the finalization of the assessment and preparation of policy development, which will probably be concluded in early 2024.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Finlay?
Thanks. I just have 3 pretty simple questions, I think. In one of the line items, it says that we donated 5 E.J. Hughes prints to nonprofits. Do we have a stash of E.J. Hughes prints, and that's what we do? Okay, thank you. And I'm just wondering on the housing section, just wondering regarding the Sherman Road property, if we have an update. I don't think we've heard much about Sherman Road in the last little while, where that's going as far as the community land trust in BC Housing.
Yeah, Mr. Swaby or Mr. Farkas?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. We don't have an update today, but very shortly, staff will be bringing forward a report to council with an update on the project.
Okay, and just one other one, just an update on Housing Accelerator, if we've heard anything about the Housing Accelerator Fund.
We haven't heard any feedback yet from the federal government.
All right, we have a recommendation. Someone want to move it? It's just to receive it for information. Moved by Councillor Callio, seconded by Councillor Stash. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Just before we move on to notice of motion, I just want to take a moment. Councillor Callio had communicated to me before the meeting that he had wanted to share with council a couple recommendations coming out of the Environmental Advisory Committee. So apologies, Councillor Callio. I made a note to remind you and just, slipped up a bit on that one. I don't know if you want to share it now. It's kind of redundant, I think, because we've moved on from that item. But
It kind of is, but I think it's necessary that I
yeah, please just convey it to council.
Sorry, as the chair of the EAC committee, they wanted for me to convey that they were in support of the STEP code, and I'll read out something here. It's at the October 17th, 2023 Environmental Advisory Committee. The committee passed a motion recommending that council adopt building bylaw number 3932 2023 and authorize me to share the reason for their support being the acceleration of the zero star carbon step code to begin on January 1st, 2024 to level 3 and to level 4 on July 1st, 2024. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Callio. Okay, we'll now move on to notices of motion, and I'm just going to turn to the corporate officer. Do we want Councillor Justice to read this out, or just read it out at the next meeting?
Yes, that's all he's permitted to do.
All right.
No clarifying, no introduction.
And nothing else, that's all you can do. Read it out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, corporate officer. The recommendation is, or will be, that council directs staff to prepare a report which provides options for creating a progressive noise bylaw which would mitigate noise complaints by 1. Leveraging best practices from other jurisdictions. 2. Taking into account the multiple aspects of noise, including its frequency, predictability, complexity, time course, duration, as well as level and decibels, which can lead to annoyance and have negative health impacts or other detrimental effects on residents' well-being. 3. Recognizing that in residential areas there are shift workers sleeping, home businesses operating, and an increasing number of people working remotely from home during work hours, throughout which increased noise levels have in the past been tolerated. 4. Complying with our OCP goal of both mitigating the impact of current sources of noise pollution and preventing the creation of new sources.
Thank you. We'll now move on to new business. But before getting into the specific items we pulled from the consent agenda, I just wanted to advise council that I have received legal advice in relation to the conflict of interest declarations I've made in the past. And it has been determined that I'm entitled to participate in matters related to funding grants for Clement Central Society and the Cowichan Estuary Restoration Conservation Association, and also development approvals related to 934 Knipson Road. As my spouse is no longer employed by the Clement Central Society, I no longer have a family member working on a UVic research project with the Cowichan Estuary Restoration and Conservation Association, and the advice I received from, legal advice I received was that the application regarding 934 Knipson Road, which I would note council has already adopted, is more than half a kilometer away from where I live, so that it was overly cautious on my part to begin with to even declare conflict in that case. So just wanted to clear that for council, because there is a item related to the Cowichan Estuary Conservation Association coming up under the consent agenda, although it doesn't relate to a funding request, which they had previously made to council some time ago. So now turning to the items we pulled in the consent agenda, I'm just going to turn to Councillor Finley. I believe you pulled 2.2.3, but it wasn't 2.2.2 as well. No, just the third quarter financial report. So over to you, Councillor Finley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just on page 22, regarding the aquatic center roof replacements, 95% done. I wasn't here obviously on council when that got voted in. My understanding is the aquatic center is not that old, so I don't want to rehash something that's been hashed at the table here, but it just seems like a colossal waste of money to have replaced a roof. Obviously it's 95% done, there's no more point in discussing it further, but I just wanted to note that.
Did you have an opinion? Question, because it has come up before at council why that roof did need replacement in such a short period, and I'm sure staff would be happy to.
Yeah, if staff can answer the question, I'd be quite curious. As I mean, aquatic center usually should have a roof built that can handle an aquatic center.
Sorry, Mr. Swaby, to put you on the spot.
No, actually, that's okay, Mr. Mayor. We can follow up with an email if I don't cover it completely, but aquatic centers are a very harsh environment, and we were surprised that the roof did not last as long as it should, but the facts are that it needed replacing, and it was outside of the warranty, and it did cost a lot of money to replace. It was the environment is a very harsh environment in pool.
Okay. Second question, on the same page here in 22, it says the site for the new Crofton Reservoir has been cleared, but the developer has postponed the project due to unfavorable construction bids coming in over budget. And that, if correct me if I'm wrong, had to do with what's now called the Seacrest subdivision. Is that a correct statement?
It's my understanding, but I'll turn to staff to weigh in on that one.
On Osborne Bay Road.
I think we could follow up with. We'll follow up with more information on that.
Okay, I'm curious about that because that property is now for sale. So I'm just wondering if this reservoir is potentially, or even our passing of the EL4 code might be the reason that property is for sale and no longer proceeding. So, but I'm very curious about the reservoir. Obviously is.
Well, the reservoir, Mr. Mayor, there certainly is challenges that the developer did not agree with the standard that we wanted the reservoir built to, and they weren't willing to proceed, I guess, until they could reevaluate the economics of their subdivision.
Is the subdivision pushing forward, the reservoir required to ensure the subdivision pushes forward?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stash?
If you would allow me, Your Worship, on that, it is thanks to Councillor Finley bringing that, then if it's in indefinite pause, the builders left a large-scale water line blocking all the hiking and bike trails. And everybody has to climb over it every single day. So it's good exercise. I'm just curious I just wanted to put that out there. If it's an indefinite thing, maybe just something that the department will look at.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we don't know it's indefinite, but we'll certainly review that. I haven't been there for a while and I didn't know it was still an impediment, so we'll have a look at that.
Great, thanks, Mr. Swaby. We'll now move on to item 2.2.4. So this is the Circa letter regarding obtaining a permit to improve the trail along the Cowichan estuary. And my understanding, and I think all the council received the email that came in, they're asking us to basically write a letter to the inspector of dikes requesting that they receive permission, I believe, to remove some of the Scotch broom on a trail in that area. Councillor Finley.
Mr. Mayor, with respect to this, does this dike have anything to do with the removal of the other dike to flood the estuary lands? Is this completely separate from that? Or?
Yeah, in my understanding, there is a connection though, in that there has obviously concern about people who use the existing dike trails and where they're gonna go once those are removed. And part of the thinking with this, I think it was outlined in the letter, was that it's an alternative trail that could be enhanced for those people who are, losing the trail they've been using for years with the dike removal project, and that if the Scotch broom is removed from this trail, it's going to provide them with an attractive place to hike as an alternative.
Okay, and my understanding is they're not asking for any funding or anything from us?
No, I think it's just, my understanding is they haven't had success with the inspector for dikes, and the hope is that a letter from North Cowichan might kind of push things along a bit. Again, my understanding is it's just permission to rip out a bunch of Scotch broom. It's not like we're having to pay anybody to do that.
Thanks.
Councillor Justice.
Mr. Mayor, this is valuable work and it would be in North Cowichan's interest to facilitate it. Do we need a motion for you to be able to write a letter of support, or can you just go ahead?
Yeah, I see the corporate officers nodding. As long as there's no objection from council, I'll write the letter. Councillor Callia? Do you want a motion? Okay. You'll move to authorize the mayor to write the letter.
Yeah.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Callia. Councillor Manhas.
Mr. Mayor, do you know how much consultation have they had with Western Forest Products? Because I know Western Forest Products, it's part of the estuary, and I think they should be involved with this because, who knows what this is going to lead to further down the road, given that the Circa group actually wants to, have moved forward to shutting down that mill in the past.
Yeah, my understanding is, and if we could pull up the letter here, the letter does reference Western Forest Products being on site, and we'd have to follow up with the Circa to confirm it. My understanding is the relationship with the Western Forest Products is very positive at this time.
I'll support this with a follow-up from Western Forest Products, see what kind of consultation was had with Western Forest and if they're on board with this.
Yeah, I planned on checking in with our contact Western Forest Products anyway, so definitely bring that up when I talk to them next, which I anticipate will be within the next week. Yeah, Councillor Finley.
If this doesn't affect the estuary plan, I guess, but I understand there might be an injunction against that process moving forward from the landowners in that area. If we pass a motion for this, is that okay, I guess, is the question, when there might be an injunction against the rest of the estuary dike removal?
I think they're just totally separate. Perfect. This, by having them come in and rip a bunch of broom, will be helpful for people who want to hike in there, but that's all it is trying to help these people get permission to go tear up some broom. Amendment?
No, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I was just down there the other day, and where they're actually gonna remove the broom is just gonna make a loop so that people can actually walk out there as a trail rather than going out and back. And so, they're not changing anything or doing anything, and they're just basically taking down some broom. That's my understanding. They're not digging up any dikes, they're not, punching any holes in anything.
We okay to call the question? Okay, all in favor and opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 2.2.6. So I did pull this, and I'm going to turn to Councillor Manhas, but we did receive a letter from the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board with regards to 2024 budget. And yeah, I think the concern from some of us is that they are looking at a pretty big budget increase that I believe our staff have calculated translates into about a 1% tax increase for the municipality. And yeah, not to put you on the spot, Councillor Manhas is our representative there, but I know you were at the meeting and might be able to provide some context on it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The budget has gone up 3.4% overall to 30. Local governments will contribute $32.5 million of a $38 million budget. The bulk of the rest will maybe be made up from the provincial government. As you are correct, it's about $324,000, I believe, which is our addition for us in North Cowichan. It's about a 1% tax increase. There is a couple of there are some capital projects in the works right now. In Masset, they're building a new library there that's gone from, as anybody can understand, what the original budget was to what the actual cost is going to be now. It's quite inflated. And also, way of Masset is tough to get contractors out there. They don't come cheap out there. So that's one of the reasons. And also, there was a adjustment done to one of the reserve funds at year end that also impacted this budget. So.
Thank you, Councillor Manhas. I appreciate the explanation. I think that the concern from my end is that we're facing some pretty big cost pressures going into our 2024 budget. And while I'm a longtime user and supporter of our public library system, I do have concern about the budget increase and how that's going to impact our taxpayers in North Cowichan. And what I was going to suggest to council is a couple options you might consider. One, my initial thinking was perhaps to authorize me to send a letter to the CEO expressing our concern about this with the with where cost of living is at, and if they might be able to go back and take another look at it. The other idea, though, is that we invite the CEO to one of our upcoming council meetings to explain these changes, in which case we can ask questions directly and get a sense of what the rationale is, and you know, again, express those concerns face to face, which will probably be a lot more effective than a letter from the mayor. So if it's okay with council, I would ask if you could authorize me to reach out to the CEO and invite that individual to.
Also move, and the chair is the chair of the Vancouver Regional Library actually is from the Nanaimo, so.
Okay, perhaps authorize to invite the chair and the CEO to come to a future council meeting to explain the changes in the 2024 VRL budget. Okay, moved by Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Callio. Yeah, call the question, all in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 2.2.7. Over to you, Councillor Callio.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak to the agenda item 2.2.7. As you can see on our agenda, there's a petition with 65 signatures from residents in that neighborhood complaining about the constant barking at the dog kennel, which is at the end of Town End Road. Also, another concern there is the speeding on Town End Road from people who are dropping off and picking up their pets. My wife and myself have both walked this road on occasion. I've had a near miss from a speeding vehicle on that road myself, and I'd like to put forth a motion to direct staff to prepare a report with options for addressing the traffic and noise issues on Town End Road.
It's been moved. We have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Manhas. Councillor Justice, and then Councillor Manhas.
When I was reading report and looking at the petition, it didn't become clear to me what people were asking for in the petition. Is it essentially what you've brought to us as a motion?
How do you mean, Councillor Justice?
What the petition, like people were signing the petition, but I didn't sort of read it closely enough to sort of get the idea of what they were asking for. I tried looking, but it didn't become immediately obvious.
I think the petition was brought to the people and asked for them to voice their opinion that the noise level coming from the kennel at the end of Town End Road is, as with a noise bylaw that you motion you brought forward, is interfering with their lives and their livelihood.
Okay, Councillor Justice, before I turn to Councillor.
But there's also, sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
There's also, the other issue there is also, which is just as important, is the speeding that's going on Town End Road.
Well, yeah, no, thank you. It's absolutely it's absolutely an issue.
Yeah, and just to elaborate a bit on what Councillor Cali mentioned, I've been out there, as has our CAO as well, and it's a very narrow road. I mean, I was driving slow, leaving Mr. Chima's house, and thought I was almost going to get hit. And then, you know, there is a trail nearby to the dog kennel, so there's obviously concerns around some of the noise with the barking there as well. You want to?
If I might just follow up. Yeah, I did actually. I went out there myself and observed the narrowness of the road and imagined what it would be like having people going down there dropping off dogs. I also listened for the barking sounds of dogs, but when I was there, I didn't happen to hear some. But just a thought when we consider the noise bylaw from next week.
Councillor Manhas and Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The two issues are that it's not the speed is also an issue, but the amount of traffic, because also horse ring, there's 2 16-acre parcels of property there. What they're hoping to do is have the dog kennel moved to the back of the property, so it's not so far to the front. And Mr. Chima said that would probably rectify most of the noise issues. But the other issue is the amount of traffic. He called me this morning and he goes, yesterday there were horses around the ring there yesterday, and people were bringing the horses, like one trailer with 4 horses, one with 2 horses. They're fairly big trailers, and just the extra traffic and stuff there. So we can I'm not sure what we can do about the amount of traffic, but it's the noise and the speed of the traffic. So,
Councillor Finlay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. One of the possible solutions in this letter is an alternate entrance via Room Road. How difficult would that be to do? Because I mean, Room Road is obviously a bigger road. I have a very good friend that lives on Town End. I've been down the road 100 times, and yeah, it's definitely thin, and perhaps even, as they suggested, a speed limit sign would be great. But I'm just curious about what sort of pain and aggravation this dog kennel might have to actually get access off Room Road.
Yeah, I think that would be part of our evaluation, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it'd be part of the staff report, yeah. Councillor Justice, quickly.
Sorry, one more. It's always prudent when we're asking for a staff report to learn a little bit about what we're asking for in terms of time and resources. So I wonder if staff could just tell us if this is a really large ask that's going to delay some of our major issues, or whether this is something that could get slipped in.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm very happy that question's asked. There is a definite staff resourcing that would have to go into this, but probably more important to think about is there's a backlog of these issues that have been through complaints that I'm assuming council through this motion wants to have this preemptively dealt with before the 60 or to 100 others that we have in the queue. And that's probably more of the issue that concerns me, because we don't have a good handle yet on these traffic calming requests that have been brought forward. It takes a lot of work because we need to meet with the public. We need to discuss the options, whether it's speed bumps. Knowing that there's horse trailers, for example, creates a whole other dynamic on how you can do speed calming that will help with allowing these vehicles to get past. And of course, the barking dogs issue is particularly difficult because it's a permitted use. So we will talk to the owner about options for helping with containing the noise, but those are time-consuming issues for sure. Noise bylaws and traffic calming are very time-consuming.
Sorry, Councillor Toporowski, been waiting patiently for a while. Can I come back to you in a moment? Yeah, Councillor Toporowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, most of the stuff has already been discussed. Mr. Chima was concerned about traffic. I guess one of his family members was walking down the road and, narrowly missed being hit. Speeding to and fro from the dog kennel, people that were going by, and people that stop them on the road and get upset, and also I know it was suggested that they call the police, and I see that they've, documented how many times the dogs barked and everything. And I know someone made a comment about we didn't hear anything about the speeding or traffic in this petition, because I think the dog barking is probably making them go crazy. So it's the most urgent thing to look at right now. I know it is a permitted use, but I guess that was, something that can be looked into. I know we do have a master transportation plan and whatnot, and then that road has large ditches on either side. So I know that there was some issue about what kind of traffic calming measures can we take for this roadway. I think that's one of the things that can be, something that can be answered in our report that comes forward. I guess that's where we're heading to, and if you need a motion, I will support a motion to have a report come back.
I think we got a mover and seconder.
And I do know that you've seen how many people were affected in that area, and Finley had mentioned the other access off the other way, and whatnot. I see you smiling. But yeah, so a Froome Road, I don't know what that would look like. So it'll be interesting to see what the report comes back. Also, this is something in Christopher's motion that he brought forward, because these are one of many issues that we deal with on how to mitigate noise and growth in our area, because we have more and more people building things and home businesses and whatnot. So something to look at. Thanks.
Councillor Justice to close.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple of things that I want to say, and they're sort of in the realm of process, because I definitely support this motion and what it's trying to achieve. But I guess one issue is that we do have this notice of motion policy, whereby we give a notice of a motion that we're going to make 2 weeks before, at least one meeting cycle before we actually consider it. But we also have this process of consent agenda, and this expectation that we can make minor sorts of motions as a result of requests that come in letters or whatever. So what I'm sort of feeling a little bit uncomfortable with right now is that we're sort of making a decision on what could be a fairly big ask in terms of resources without that sort of 2-week time period to consider it as if it was a notice of motion. So one of the things I would like to maybe suggest is that we treat this as a notice of motion, and that it comes back with a background report and we discuss it at the November 1st meeting. I don't know whether you're willing to consider that, Councillor Callio, but that would be one thing, just as a sort of a consistency in process thing. The second thing that I wanted to say is that with respect to timelines for a motion like this, Mr. Swaby. Many times in the past, although it was a fairly distant past, like last term, you often said that when a motion like this comes, the expectation is that without a strict timeline, the expectation is that it just gets into a lineup, like it's at the back of the line. Whereas today you just said, no, my assumption is that you want this dealt with right away. So that would be the other thing, is some clarity about that. And if you want this dealt with right away, like at the head of the line, then maybe that needs to be an amendment to the motion.
Yeah. Mr. Swaby, did you?
I think Councillor Justice has really brought up issues that we've always grappled with, the loophole and how you can get motions forward. And, you know, the context of why I made the statement about this goes to the start of the line is because there's a little bit of back, because councillors are under a lot of pressure, including the mayor, weekly, daily, from residents. And although I can tell the mayor or councillors, yes, we've heard this and it's in the process now, when it comes forward as a motion, that means that you're making it a priority for us. And it would help, I think, in the kinds of reports that that Councillor Justice is talking about, is that council grapple with that on how quickly can we do it. We can provide some information about that and clarify that in the report that we bring forward. But I appreciate that acknowledgement.
Councillor Stash?
Does it make any sense then, instead of rather that I have a motion, just have that referred to the Transportation Master Plan, and then subsequently, to speed up 2.2.9, take Councillor Justice comment that he just made and include 2.2.9 and send that to our council workshop that we're working on with regards to council procedures? Those are ongoing staff allocated resources right now without committing new commitments on staff and their very loaded timelines.
Mr. Mayor, what I can also tell you on the barking dogs, sorry about not knowing the kennel name, bylaws is trying to make an effort to meet with them and talk to them specifically about, you know, we're getting these concerns, what can we talk about, how can we manage this better, because if it continues, obviously your business is going to be under a lot of scrutiny, and we'd rather try and head it off now. We don't know if there's any solutions, but it's worth the discussion first before we bring out any other actions that may try and deal with that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think Mr. Swaby, talking to Mr. Chima and some of the other petitioners, the people that signed the petitions, they mentioned, like I said earlier, if, you know, 16 acres there, there's 2 parcels, 16 acres each, if they can move it to the back of the property, and that they may be happy with that. They said, you know, just minimize the loudness of the parks.
It almost looks like a perfect location for this type of use, but it also reminds me a lot of some of the properties that I've seen in other provinces, that this is kind of the dividing line between rural and more urban, and you can see how there's conflicts between the two. The road standard is definitely a road standard that we probably are moving towards in rural communities where there's open ditches for environmental reasons and narrower pavement. But I do note at the end of the road, where probably Councillor Callio came for his walk, there was a stream of people coming through from a walkway onto the road and making their way up to some other access point. And that's something we should have a look at and evaluate on how we can help with that, because the road does not accommodate two-way traffic and pedestrians on the pavement. It's pretty narrow.
Councillor Callio?
In conjunction with what CAO Swaby saying is that, yes, I mean, that little entranceway onto Town End Road makes it a loop. And so, for example, when we take our walk from our place, which is on Davis Crescent, with Moose Road onto Lakes and Lakes downtown and then into Harmony Estates, and so that's our loop. And that road, I mean, I have yet to have walked down that road and not run into at least 3, 4, 5, 6 people on each walk. And the reason that is because it's absolutely spectacularly beautiful down there to walk through there. on a summer evening. It's just amazing, and it's a highly used, you know, it's yes, I guess I'm pushing to have this push to the forefront, but I think there's a reason for that, and the reason is, you know, there's safety on this road, and yes, there's safety on every road. Everybody's problem, you know, needs to be looked at. But in this case, I think that, you know, I mean, I don't walk there that often, but when I do, like I said, I run into it's an amazing amount of people because you have that whole community there, and they all walk through Town End Road when they go for a walk. They walk out Town End Road, down Lakes, and then back in, all the way back into Harmony Estates and back to their homes. I mean, that road probably, if you did numbers, you know, gets a couple hundred people a day walking it, maybe more, I don't know. But, because people, like I said, from our neighborhood, people from our neighborhood walk down that road. And, you know, in conjunction with that, you know, I had Mr. Chima come and knock on my door more than once, and the thing is, you know, he conveyed to me that it's ruining his life, this barking, as you can see in the report here. I mean, 300 barks to 343 to 357, 409 to 421, 47 barks 4 times, barking continuously. It just goes on and on. There's pages of it. And the same thing, you know, with the people driving on the road. I mean, you drove it yourself, Mayor, and you come around that corner, it's a blind corner, and that's where we almost got hit one day. And if my wife had been less agile, maybe she would have been hit. So, yes, I'm pushing for it, and I'm going to continue to push for this to go forward. And I'd like to see this motion go forward. And maybe I'm jumping the queue with it. I don't know, but there's a process to follow. But sometimes we have to step out of the process. So that's my say.
All right, any further discussion? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Justice opposed, motion carries. We'll now move on to item 2.2.8. Was that Councillor Justice, did you pull that one?
Yeah, thank you. If I've got the right one. This is the letter from the Somenos Marsh Wildlife Society. Looking for help with the ongoing problem that they've been trying to resolve for years with respect to encouraging the Ministry of Highways to improve the safety of the highway access for the open air. I have a hard time evaluating the problem and the proposed solution that the Somenos Wildlife Society has advanced. So I guess I'm wondering whether staff can provide any guidance on that, and maybe that's putting you on the spot because it is a sort of a complex request, but if you've got any thoughts on that.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you for the question, Councillor Justice. Staff, as you know, have been in contact with MOTI, and we did think we had a solution with the water main replacement project, which, as you know, due to funding challenges, hasn't proceeded. It's been quite some time since we've spoken to MOTI, since June, and I think there would be merit in staff reaching out again to MOT staff to look for an optimal solution. In speaking with engineering, the short-term solution Somenos Marsh Society has brought forward may not be the best possible option from a MOTI perspective, but that's something we would pursue, as well as other potential safety considerations that we could address in the short term.
Okay, so
could I? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I wouldn't mind just adding that we have been down this road quite a bit, as George is talking about. It probably would be good to have a motion to give us some political support to write once we coalesce a solution again and talk to them. Maybe the mayor could write the Minister of Transportation and suggest that they have a good look at this.
Just maybe suggesting council authorize me to do that now?
Authorize you to write a letter when appropriate, and we'll help with that at the right timing.
Yeah, I would move that.
Move. Councillor Finley, seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll now move on to item 2.2.9. Was that Counselor Finley, did you pull that one? Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Really, I'm talking to the second portion of this email from Mr. Rusland. I think the first portion was covered off by Ms. Richards when she spoke earlier regarding stacking the sheet. I think she responded quite well to that. The reason I pulled this was for the second section where Mr. Rusland talks about allowing up to 10 speakers' names, not 5 on the sheet. My view is that we should always hear from the public. I don't think we should have a 5 minimum at all. I think if it's 3 or 23, I think that's fine. That's my view on it. I know we're going to have some more discussion on council procedure going forward, but I just want to bring that forward and voice my opinion that I actually agree with Mr. Rusland this time.
All right. Counselor Kelly.
I'm gonna buy a lottery ticket. I'd just like to say that I think it's best to leave it at 5, and at almost every council meeting that I've been to at this council table, the mayor and council agrees to allow 10 people. I mean, maybe there's a time when we're pressed for time and we can only allow 5 speakers. So I think it's mute. I mean, I think we just leave it at 5, and every time it comes to the table, we get consensus from council and the mayor that we allow more speakers.
Thanks, Counselor Kelly. Counselor Stash.
As I said earlier, like if we could just, rather than not have a discussion here, just refer it to the upcoming workshop.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you. So we'll now move on to question period. Oh, Counselor Justice, with regards to the last item.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess to the corporate officer on the point that Councillor Stash just made, we are currently revamping our procedures bylaw, so that will be looking at these issues of public input and question period.
So, yes, as those were questions that were posed to council in the survey that you completed. Yeah. So it will come back with the analysis of the responses that I received.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And I know Ms. Powers and I were chatting earlier, and she said that she's been a keen watcher of other jurisdictions, and which just seems really interesting to me. But she noted that there's a great diversity in approaches to consider these things. So I look forward to that analysis.
All right, we'll now move on to question period. So just to stress again, question period is an opportunity for the public to ask brief questions regarding business discussed during the meeting. So I'll ask any members of the public, if you'd like to step forward to the lectern, state your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My question is...
Oh, Ms. Benson, I know we know who you are and your address, but just for protocol.
Yes, sorry, Joyce Benson, Drinkwater Road, North Cowichan. And specifically with 2.2.4, the Circa obtaining a permit to improve the trail along the Cowichan estuary. My question to the mayor is, will specific contact be made, further to the discussion that you had before you made the vote, will specific contact be made with Western Forest Products for council's satisfaction before requesting support from the province for Circa's involvement in the Cowichan Bay estuary? And the reason that I ask that is there has been a history, and many people, so this is my question, many people are concerned about Circa's, specifically Chair Gooch Sherholtz, ulterior motives in the Cowichan Bay estuary. And I realized that you'd made mention earlier about a potential conflict of interest for yourself, Mr. Mayor. And being that your family is friends and probably involved still with the Circa organization, that there is a history of...
point of order.
Yes, I'm going to say...
She made an accusation of another member of the public, he's saying possibly in a defamatory way. I just wanted to call point of order on that. I'm not sure if that was appropriate.
Oh, so my question is whether or not you're going to make specific contact with Western Forest Products. And my reason for that question is, having been on council, the chair of Circa came here and was attacking Western Forest Products as its existence as a mill, an industry in Cowichan Bay some years ago. And so there is a lot of skepticism about the involvement that Circa has in Cowichan Bay estuary. And to say that they're doing this because of a change
of an existing dike that is well-used and well-loved, that they're probably behind it being destroyed, then to come in here, they
Yeah.
need to address, you need to address Western Forest Products out of respect for the history of Gooch Scherholz and Circa and his motives.
Great, thank you, Ms. Benson.
And
Yeah,
I'd like that done to hear that it's gonna be done before any question goes to the province for support.
so just to be clear, they're asking for support to remove Scotch broom from
Yeah.
an existing trail. But I can confirm I will be following up with Western Forest Products.
You made mention of that as a conversation, but I wanted to hear a specific approach. And part of the reason is that Pacific Industrial Marine worked with Circa to make a breach and worked with them, did all kinds of free work. And then they went after, they were trying to eliminate them too.
No,
So
got
there's
it,
a
got it.
history
Yeah.
here that's well known.
And what I will say is I have to follow up with something else with Western Forest Products, so I will be following up with them and I will discuss this matter.
Perfect.
Thank
That's
you.
the clarification
All
I
right,
needed. Thank you.
enjoy your evening. I don't see any other members of the public in the gallery, so I'll turn to IT staff and ask if there are any virtual attendees with their hands raised.
Mr. Mayor, there is not.
All right, that concludes our business, so I'll declare this meeting adjourned.